Good afternoon, civics class. Welcome to Unit 7.1, talking about the office of the president. You're looking right now at the Oval Office, the room where it happens. This is where the president goes to work every day, working at the White House, and performs a lot of different roles that we're going to be looking at over the next few days. What are the qualifications of the president? Well, there's several of them. First of all, you've got to be a natural-born citizen, 35 years of age, and a resident of the country for 14 years. We don't just make this stuff up. Of course, it comes from that handy-dandy book that you have with you called the United States Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 4 tells you everything you need to know about how you can become President of the United States. While you have to be 35 years of age, nobody has been elected president at the age of 35. Actually, the youngest president to ever be elected was Theodore Roosevelt. Old Teddy was 43 years of age, 236 days into his 43rd birthday when he became president because of the assassination of William McKinley. The oldest president, Donald Trump. He was 70 years old, 220 days when he was sworn in as president. The average age is 55 years of age. A couple of other interesting, they're not qualifications, but just unique facts that you might be interested in. For instance, height. The tallest president was, as you might have guessed, Abraham Lincoln, who came in at 6 feet 4 inches. The shortest president of the United States was James Madison. He was 5 feet 4 inches. So you can kind of see the shortest 5 feet 4, the tallest 6 foot 4. If you're curious as to where Donald Trump fits in, Donald Trump comes in at 6 foot 3 inches. President Obama before him was 6 feet 1 inch. Another interesting thing, talking about weight. The heaviest president that we had was William Howard Taft. He came in at 340 pounds. American history class, we talk about what his weight did for him and the White House. The one who weighed the least, James Madison, once again. He weighed 100 pounds is how much he weighed at his presidency. If you're curious about Donald Trump, what we've been told is that he weighs 239 pounds. President Obama weighed 180 pounds in his presidency. A couple of other things you might be interested in. By the way, there are two presidents, Andrew Johnson as well as Abraham Lincoln, who had no formal education at all, whereas everybody else basically had some form of education. Harry Truman was the last person who was president without a college degree. Everybody since Truman has had a college degree. So just some interesting facts, if you will, about the presidency. But what are their powers? What is it that they do? What are they responsible for? Well, they have many different powers. The first thing they have is called executive power. He has the opportunity to issue executive orders that basically can carry out constitutional duties. You'll see this a lot when it comes to presidents who feel the need to basically put something out there that Congress can't do, or Congress is taking too long to do it. He's got the power to issue an executive order. And we've seen President Trump as well as President Obama use a lot of executive powers to be able to put things in place that they deem to be important, especially with Trump using executive orders as it relates to immigration, to borders. Those are more in the lines of executive orders. He also has the opportunity of appointment power. This is when the president decides who he wants to be in his cabinet, his ambassadors, diplomats, cabinet members, heads of agencies, federal judges. So as a president, you want people that are going to be loyal to you and do the work that you expect. You want somebody working close beside you. If you go into a business, you don't want anybody who goes against your business policies to be working with you, because you're not going to be successful. And that is why you look at President Trump. He has a lot of cabinet members that have come and gone because they maybe didn't agree with him. And he needed people that were going to be loyal, that would be true to what he believes is the correct vision for America. So he gets the opportunity to appoint a variety of people to particular positions, but also not just to appoint them, but he also has that power to remove them. And you hear a lot about that in the news today with Trump, President Trump removing a lot of people from these particular places of position, and he has that right. He hired them, and technically he has the right to fire him. It might not look good, but that's his right. That's his constitutional thing. Now, the Senate can confirm or reject certain nominations for as ambassadors, diplomats, things like that, but usually they're going to pass. We also have diplomatic powers. The president has the opportunity to make treaties with foreign nations. Now, the Senate needs to approve this treaty that enters, but he's got the right to make those decisions, to talk through. Also, he recognizes foreign nations and grants them legitimacy and gives them power. And so these are just a few of the diplomatic powers to work with foreign nations. And of course, he has military powers. I think this is one of my favorite pictures that speaks of the presidency over here. This is Lyndon Johnson, and this is Johnson as he is in the midst of the Vietnam War. And that was a terrible time period in American history, and it was very agonizing and actually caused President Johnson to not seek re-election. He said, you could even nominate me and I will refuse. I will not have this position again, because it was really, really difficult. But he's president. The president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and he has pretty much unlimited power to use troops without a declaration of war. However, people grew concerned with one man or woman being able to put troops in harm's way. And so we have in 1973 this War Powers Resolution Act, which basically says that the president must tell Congress within 48 hours that he has put people into combat. So the president can send somebody to fight, he can send somebody to battle, but he's got 48 hours in which he's got to be willing to share with Congress that, hey, this is what I did. I had to send these people to war. And then he's also got 60 days. If Congress hasn't accepted that proposal, then he's got to finish what he started in 60 days and bring those troops home. Now, if Congress says, hey, we agree with you, that's fine. You can keep them out there longer. Hence, you start looking at Afghanistan, Iraq, some of those aspects. But if President Trump decided he wanted to send troops to North Korea, and he just did that, then he's got to report it to Congress, and then Congress has to agree with the decision, or he's got to send them home in 60 days. So he does have power. You might be saying, well, wait a second, why can't he just do that on the spot? Well, you think about this. How hard is it going to be for a president to get all members of Congress together to talk about why you're doing what you're doing and to get them to agree on something? It's hard enough just to get them to agree on anything, but much less in a time of war. You need to be able to have that quick response. You can pull them out if you need to, but you need to have a president that's able to just say, yeah, go do this, go handle this, and then we'll deal with all the other particulars a little bit later. The president, as you can say, 30 days to pull out and return troops home if Congress doesn't agree. Of course, he's got legislative powers. This is basically when he comes in and he recommends through the State of the Union what he wants to see America do and how he wants to do it. And he places a check on legislative branch. He has the right, if Congress sends something and he doesn't like it, he has the right to not accept it. We're talking about this Corona package, and it was $2 trillion, and it was worked out between the House and between the Senate, and everybody agreed on it. It doesn't become law until the president puts his name on it. And if he doesn't like it, he can veto it. He can say, I reject it. And then Congress can come back and they can override it by 2/3 votes in both houses, which is very hard to do, but it can be that way. We've also talked about the do nothing in the pocket veto that he has the opportunity to do as well. And if he wants to call Congress in, he can call them. He has that power. He has legislative power. Judicial power. This is when he has the opportunity to do quite a few things that can be controversial. Number one, it's called pardon. This is the legal forgiveness of a crime. This is something we mentioned President Ford and pardon Nixon regarding Watergate. So President Nixon, remember, he resigned because he knew he was going to get impeached, convicted, thrown out of office. And so the vice president that he had selected was Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford becomes president. Gerald Ford knew that if the nation was going to heal, if the nation was going to move forward, they had to do away with this whole Nixon and Watergate thing. And so Ford basically says, I'm going to pardon Nixon. Whether he did wrong or he didn't do wrong or whatever happened, I'm just pardoning him. Let's move past this. Let's remove it. So you have this right to pardon. You'll hear President Trump speak quite often about people that he's thinking about pardoning, people that he thinks has been done wrong. He has the right to legally forgive them of a crime, to get them out of jail, take it off their record. That can happen. He also has the opportunity of what's known as amnesty. This is a blanket pardon to a group of violators. Back in 1977, there was a lot of people who did not want to fight in the Vietnam War. They didn't believe in the war. And so President Carter decided to grant amnesty to all of those people who had called draft dodging. That's when they were drafted to go fight and they refused to go fight. And he said, that's a crime, but I'm going to forgive the crime to all of you. So a group of people, you're forgiven. And then he can select judges, especially Supreme Court judges. This is very, very important because the president is basically making his mark on courts. And you look at the Supreme Court now, President Trump has put 2 conservatives on the Supreme Court. And these are young guys. As you can see, this is Neil Gorsuch right here. These are young guys in their 50s. So they're going to be on the court for at least 30, 40 years, which means many things can happen over time. So this is an extremely powerful thing that you can do, judicial powers. There are some checks on the presidential power. Of course, here's son Bush, and the baby wasn't too happy to meet him. Of course, presidential power, you only have a 2-term limit. You can be investigated by Congress. There's the impeachment that we've seen in the media. Pay attention to the press briefings going on right now with President Trump. As you can see, the media always acting as a watchdog, fact-checking the particular president each and every day. President has a lot of powers. He's not absolute power. There's checks and balances against him, but there's a lot of things that he or she can do to ensure that America is moving forward in the right direction. So this is the first part of our look at the executive branch. This is the presidential powers, and then we'll turn around and look at presidential duties as we move forward.